Well, this has been a crazy few weeks. I'm not going to beat around the bush. You guys already know the news. Charlie Kirk assassinated, a whole bunch of controversy and conspiracy about who killed him and who is behind the assassination, and a whole bunch of conspiracy theories, which, as conspiracy theories tend to be, always pin it, of course, on the Jews. The queen bee of the conspiracy theorists, of course, being Candice Owens herself. Okay, now that's all background knowledge I know we know already. Now I'm getting at this recording much later than I had planned, and at the time of this recording, it's been a few days since Candice Owens dropped her receipts about Charlie Kirk leaving the Israel movement. She somehow, and we still don't know how, but she somehow got hold of a text message between Charlie and some of his best friends where he was venting some frustrations about some Jewish donors. And from that, she extrapolated that Charlie was turning his back on Israel, was leaving evangelicism, was going to become Catholic, was going to reconnect with Candice, was going to leave Erica and marry Candice, and the two of them will have lived happily ever after. Okay, those last three I added, but it's basically the vibe that everyone's getting with all of her conspiracy theories. But anyway, this was all conjecture until Charlie's best friend and current spokesperson of Turning Point USA, Andrew Colvert, did confirm that these texts were legitimate. And in the aftermath, a lot of people have been questioning what this means for the pro-Israel movement, and Matt Walsh also posted a video. And in his video, Matt brings up some good questions that I think we need to address and wrestle with. Now, at the beginning of his video, Matt did express his shock that these messages were legit, and I pretty much share the same sentiment. However, that really doesn't matter now. Like, it doesn't matter what I thought about the messages. Yeah, I thought that they were fishy, but the facts are that they are legit, so my opinion doesn't matter on that. So let's just get into the video itself.
Okay, so the pro-Israel side lost Charlie Kirk. You know, that's what he said in his message, in his own words. Now, he may have been venting. He may have been expressing frustration. He obviously was doing that. He may not have flipped over to being actually actively anti-Israel. He didn't say that.
Now, I do think that this is an interesting point. Like, Candice seems to imply that Charlie's frustration is like, oh, he's going to go turn his back on Israel, he's going to betray them and all that stuff, but Matt's saying, nah, he's not saying that he's going anti-Israel, he's just questioning this pro-Israel movement itself. I think that's an important difference. I think in light of everything he said about Israel, and including his letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu, it definitely is clear that Charlie has had a lot of frustrations with Israel. Not the Jewish people, not the state of Israel, not the people of Israel, but really just more how they're handling the public opinion of themselves. He clearly articulates that he loves Israel and he loves the Jewish people. This is consistent with his letter to Netanyahu as well as his public speakings. But his frustration is really in how the pro-Israel crowd is handling the dispute. You read his letter to Netanyahu and it is clear that he's tearing apart their campaign trail. This is not proof that he's suddenly anti-Israel. Sometimes genuine love is expressed in frustration when you see somebody destroying their life, or you see somebody apathetic to change things that are destroying their life. In which case, the media is destroying Israel, and Israel hasn't been trying that hard to fight back. Expressing frustration with this would not be much different from expressing frustrations with a friend who won't give up smoking. It's not because you suddenly hate them, it's because you see them ruining their life with this bad habit. We should realize that there is a massive mid-ocean ridge between venting frustration with Jewish donors and hating Israel. We should take this private message venting in light of his public opinion of Israel. Now you might say, well yeah, he had this public opinion about Israel, but this is just 48 hours before his assassination, so see, he was starting to change. Except the very next day he was talking with some of his Israel friends and openly talking about how excited he was to continue supporting them. Josh Hammer has presented his receipts on this position. And of course, Candice Owens responded to this by just brushing it under the rug and accusing Josh Hammer himself as being part of the conspirators to have Charlie Kirk assassinated. At the time of this recording, that is still an unfolding story, but it's getting dicey. At the current time, let's get back to the Matt Walsh video.
And they lost him because of how he was being treated and what he saw behind closed doors. And he was obviously not alone in feeling that way. But instead, what happens is that typically they'll do what the donors were doing to Charlie, apparently, scold and point fingers and throw the anti-Semitism charge around. And I mean, they'll do it to me because of what I'm saying right now, right? This is going to get clipped and it's going to be, oh, see, he's woke, right? He's anti-Semitic. He's, you know, that's going to happen. That's going to happen. And I'll tell you, the first major mistake you've made is that you push out your allies or your potential allies if they don't toe the line 100%. 100% perfect, clean record of being pro-Israel in every way, in all cases, all the time, always. If they fail that test, you push them out, you label them woke right, you label them anti-Semitic. And that's what Charlie experienced. He was very pro-Israel.
Yeah, this is something that I resonate with more than you might think. A thing that Charlie was open in talking about is his frustration of how any minor criticism of Jewish theology, the state of Israel, or anything Jewish, the slightest criticism of that by some marks you as an anti-Semite. Now, this is something I've also experienced a little bit of, so I can sympathize with Charlie's frustrations here. Several years ago, long before this Gaza war, I did do some videos about Israel content. One such video, I did a response to a rabbi named Rabbi Tovia Singer, and in that video, I will be honest, I did feel like I was walking on eggshells to not be anti-Semitic. Why? Well, just because I was refuting a rabbi, and I am hardly in the public eye at all. Like, look at how small my YouTube channel is. I'm a very, very small YouTube channel. And Charlie Kirk, who is in this every day, just waking up as early as possible and just diving in at it all day, every day, he would have dealt with this way more than I could even imagine. So it is very understandable that he would have had these frustrations. Again, that doesn't make him anti-Israel. And this is something that I've got friends who grew up in a Christian environment who had some church hurt and left the church and hated Christianity for it. There's a sense that, I'm sympathetic, I kind of understand it, I get it. But there's also a sense of me where I'm like, well, Christianity is true, whether or not Christians act very Christian or not. It is a fantastic reminder that we should be very careful about how we present Christ to the world. But the truth of Christianity is not decided by how well we depict Christ. And I'm always conflicted with these people who have genuine church hurt. I want to be sympathetic for them. But you've got to let fallible humans be fallible humans. The church is plenty full of fallible humans. So although I'm sympathetic to people who have church hurt, I always want to strive for truth, not just emotions from past experience. Jesus, Peter, and Paul all warn us that there will be deceivers who will creep into the church. And the Old Testament is also full of stories of individuals who create problems for the Jewish community and lead many of them astray. This is nothing new, and this is nothing we should be surprised of. Just because you've got frustrations with some people doesn't mean you hate this entire group. I think Charlie Kirk had the wisdom to know that Jewish donors were still fallible humans also. Being frustrated with Jewish donors does not mean that Charlie thought that the Jewish state was evil. Again, massive mid-ocean ridge between those two positions. I think many of us on the right really kind of have just gotten numb to liberals accusing us of being anti-Semite, or fascist, or racist, or homophobe, or bigot, or Nazis, or Hitler, or all the other kind of slanders that they give to us. Like, we get that so much that we just kind of become numb to that at this point. With the term anti-Semite, when you hear it from Jews, or even worse, when you hear it from conservatives, it feels like you're crossing a line. And sometimes we need lines. That's kind of part of being a social creature. We've kind of got to have some kind of filter in how we behave around one another, as to not upset social cues. Now, sometimes social cues do need to be upset, but this is the ebb and flow of being a social creature. The concern really is when you take that line that should be drawn here, and then you just start moving it over, kind of trying to place it in all these places that it really just doesn't belong. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people who are frustrated with the pro-Israel side are experiencing. Now, of course, the opposite, the conspiratorials, the anti-Israel, that's another bag. But it is also understandable when you're Jewish and you remember stories that your grandfather told about the horrors of the Holocaust, the horrors of the Russian pogroms, the horrors of the Afghani pogroms. And then you come into the modern world, and the modern world keeps acting like it's friendly to Jews all of a sudden. And then the biggest massacre of Jews in since the Holocaust happens and the entire world turns its back on you, you kind of have a right to have your guard up a little bit if you're a Jew. Now, that doesn't justify this hypersensitivity to call everything anti-Semitic, but this is part of the complexity of being human. Our emotions get involved and we overreact to stuff. So the experiences are real. The experiences are real for us who are walking on eggshells trying not to be called anti-Semitic. The experiences are also real for a people group who has experienced such amounts of hatred. Really, I'll put it this way. Where I think we're at is the fruit of crying wolf for too long. We've cried the anti-Semitic wolf when there wasn't a wolf. We've cried conspiracy against the Jews when there wasn't any. Well, now there are actual wolves of anti-Semitism, and we don't believe it. Now for the Tucker part.
But he also was friends with Tucker and wanted to have a conversation with Tucker. That's the right thing, by the way. It's not just that Charlie was perfectly justified and had every right to talk to whoever he wants and to platform whoever he wants. That, of course, is true. But he didn't just have the right to do it. He was right to do it. Yeah, if you're going to have a big event like America Fest, Tucker should be there. It would be absurd for him not to be there.
Now, I would disagree with this take on Tucker Carlson. And to be honest, my opinion is that Tucker Carlson is really Charlie's Judas. I've been starting to think that Tucker Carlson is getting a little shady ever since he stood up for Andrew Tate. I mean, really, Christians who are defending Andrew Tate are as Christian as progressives who are defending homosexuality. Like, how can you oppose homosexuality and defend the things that Andrew Tate boasts about? It is not the Christian way to justify sin. I don't think he's nearly as bad as Candice, but he's got some serious problems. And I think Charlie's big problem is, well, really Charlie's strength is that he was so in touch with the young crowd. The young crowd's problem is that they're so obsessed with Andrew Tate, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and all these conspiracy theories. So in a way, to kind of capture the mind of the youth, Charlie kind of needed to cater to Tucker Carlson. But to be honest, I think a lot of this crowd is just... Well, I think this younger crowd is going the way of New Atheism. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but New Atheism was successful in capturing a young generation. New Atheism is still successful for that young generation, but that young generation is now getting old and outdated and not up with the modern times, and it's kind of just embarrassing to that generation. That generation bought a whole bunch of lies from the New Atheists that we're still trying to have to brush out of them. I think Andrew Tate and Tucker Carlson has captured a young generation, but I don't think we need to cater to that generational mindset. We should speak timeless truth into all generations. Every generation has their traps. We do not cater towards those traps. We address them. And I think Tucker Carlson is going to go downhill fast. I think Turning Point is going to try to keep him on board as long as possible to honor Charlie's legacy, but I think this is going to be detrimental to Turning Point. Long term, I think Tucker Carlson is going to be an embarrassment. That said, I do support Charlie's right to continue to platform somebody that he wants to platform. And I respect his willingness to continue to platform somebody with whom he has his disagreements. This is a very process of open dialogue, not shutting somebody up because you disagree with them. This is a virtue that the world is desperately starved for. But I do think that cutting ties with Tucker would have been a wise decision. And that also said, the Jewish donors have a right to withhold their money from supporting somebody who's platforming somebody who's giving constant slimy rhetoric against the Jewish people. And of course, there's way more going on behind the scenes that we do not know about. What were the things that the Jewish donors were actually saying? How did they actually approach Charlie with these concerns? Were they being hostile? Were they being combative? Were they being confrontational? Were they just raising genuine concerns? All these people, the Jewish donors, the anti-Israel crowd, the pro-Israel crowd, Charlie, they are all human. They've all made plenty of mistakes, and the rest of us are going to continue to make mistakes. Going onward, Matt also talks about some of his different positions that he's held pretty consistently. I'm going to try to rapid fire through some of these.
Everyone knows my position, and it hasn't changed. It's that I'm not pro or anti-Israel. I'm not pro or anti any foreign country. I don't care about any country but my own. That's just my opinion. That's my perspective. I don't want foreign aid to any country, including Israel, and I always call out when I feel the U.S. is getting involved in something that it shouldn't get involved in. And if they're getting involved in something, from my perspective, for the sake of Israel, and I don't think they should, I'll say that. I was against the Iran intervention. So I'll call that out. I'll also call out the Islamic invasion of the U.S. I spent several days just over the past couple of weeks talking about that. I did multiple shows just about the situation in Dearborn. So I think I'm pretty damn consistent in my own principles when it comes to this stuff. And you don't have to share those principles, but they're mine, and I'm consistent about America first. I call out anything that I think is not America first.
I think on the surface, this is a understandable position. However, I think it's narrow-minded. It sounds right in the small scale, but really in the whole picture of things, this American isolationism is one of the dumbest things that's ever come out of the Conservative Party. We need to keep in mind that we are the superpower of the world. We're the economic powerhouse of the world. We're the greatest military of the world. We're among the most technologically advanced societies the world has ever known. And until very recently, we were leading the way in technology. Not to mention our intelligence network is really powerful. Our intelligence network that keeps us safe from terrorist attack and foreign attacks. But all of those things rely on us working with other nations. You cannot be the world superpower and an isolationist. You cannot be the economic hub of the world and be an isolationist. You can't have strong intelligence agents and be an isolationist. I've been studying the Drake Passage near Cape Horn lately, and it's kind of a very interesting history. The Drake Passage between South America and Antarctica was really the best way to get from the east to the west. So goods traveling from West Europe to East Asia or Australia, they had only one way to go, and that was the Drake Passage. Now, the Drake Passage by Cape Horn is notoriously the most dangerous waters in the world. But in the 1600s, the sailors who could actually courage the Drake Passage and the militaries who could actually protect that passage, that is what made them superpowers. The opening of the Panama Canal is part of one of the many things that contributed to America becoming the superpower of the world in the current era, because control of the networks between the East and West is that important for trade, especially a global trade network, which makes a country either thrive in the economy or fall behind in the economy. And by the way, this is the same case with the Suez Canal. Why, just a few years ago, when a ship got caught in the Suez Canal, there was so much panic over it. Because just that one ship stuck in this narrow passageway, shutting down the entire global trade network, causing millions of dollars of loss per second, that has a world economic scale. And that's why so many superpowers in the world have military bases in Yemen and Somalia. They're defending their ships' access into the Suez Canal. The fact is that being an isolationist, not caring what's going on in the world outside of your country, is just a way to ensure your country gets way behind the rest of the world. In order to maintain influence in the global trade network, you must have global influence. That's just the reality of the world. And it's not just trade, it's also military defenses. There are so many benefits for America supporting Israel. I don't really have time to get into a fraction of them here. I also want to say of the Iran thing, I share some sympathies with that. Again, kind of looking big picture of it, there really was high risk in World War III with us getting involved with Iran. I was pretty on the fence about that. If Russia and or China, or both, decided, they are not okay with us taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities, then that could have just plunged us into World War III just like that. So that was a very scary moment. That said, Iran has literally spent decades vowing to destroy Israel and America. Letting people who have spent decades vowing to destroy you develop nuclear weapons is just bad. I think that's a place where America really was caught in a rock and a hard place. If we do nothing, enemies who have vowed to destroy us get the capability to do so. If we do something, we risk World War III. I was really skeptical when we were actually in that situation, but how Trump handled that was just absolutely incredible. I think Operation Midnight Hammer should go down in history as the single greatest military operation of all time. It was just incredibly executed. And it is a testimony of just how powerful America's and Israel's alliance really is. It's seriously, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are the giants of our age, and I do think that God put them both here for such a time as this. I could not imagine any other two men being able to handle the current situation half as good as they're handling it, especially given the absolute insane pressure that they're constantly on from their enemies and their own nations. Now, Matt also went on to talk about the immigration of the West. He had some great things to say about that.
I'll also call out the Islamic invasion of the U.S. I spent several days just over the past couple of weeks talking about that. I did multiple shows just about the situation in Dearborn. I've talked about many times. I've spent a lot of time on importing, Somalis into places like Minnesota.
Yeah, I've been watching a number of his videos about the whole Dearborn situation, and Matt Walsh is absolutely cooking on that situation, especially with how many people are so afraid to talk about the Islamization of the West that's happening right now. Matt has been doing some great content on that. But then again, not just the Islamization of America, but also of Europe, UK, Germany, France, Australia, Canada. Like, there is so much going on right now. Again, too many of these American isolationists, they'll only focus on America. We need to be concerned about what's going on in the UK. Most of us have probably seen videos of people getting arrested for praying outside an abortion clinic. I've seen a video of somebody getting arrested for shouting Em Yisrael Chai in the streets of UK. We hear stories about them arresting like 30 to 40 people per day for posting offensive stuff to Muslims. We need to be very concerned about what's going on in the UK, because what happens on that side of the world affects what happens here. And I know Matt Walsh is a Catholic, so I'm going to cite a source that I think he would agree with. This is what Pope Urban II said in his speech to raise an army for the First Crusade. For your brethren who live in the East are in urgent need of your help, and you must hasten to give them the aid which has often been promised them. For, as the most of you have heard, the Turks and Arabs have attacked them and have conquered the territory of Romania, as far west as the shores of the Mediterranean and the Hellespont, which is called the Arm of St. George. They have occupied more and more of the lands of those Christians and have overcome them in 7 battles. They have killed and captured many and have destroyed the churches and devastated the empire. If you permit them to continue thus for a while with impurity, the faithful of God will be much more widely attacked by them. With what reproach will the Lord overwhelm us if you do not aid those who, with us, profess the Christian religion? I can just picture the Pope Urban II in our time, dealing with these American isolationists. Your Christian brethren are suffering in the world. You gotta go save them. What about the Nigerian Christians? What about the Somali Christians? The Christians in Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran? I saw so many Catholics get so grumpy about that church that got hit by a rogue missile in Gaza. Well, what about the many churches and many Christians that have just been hunted down and slaughtered in Muslim nations? Why are we so quick to criticize Israel for a mistake that the Muslims are intentionally doing? Christians are much freer to worship in Israel than they are in Gaza or West Bank. The last, and arguably the most important feature of global activity is supporting our allies. Should we just stand idly by while our enemies destroy our allies? Not my problem. America first. And what allies will we have when they come for us? Israel is our greatest ally. The Islamic Brotherhood has vowed, Israel today, America tomorrow. Today is Saturday, tomorrow Sunday. So we need to stand with Israel as they fight this war, and we need to stand with Europe as they face mass Islamic immigration, because I can promise you, we're next. And if we don't stand up for our allies, we won't have any allies to stand up for us. Martin Niemöller warned us of this. Now, of course, the danger of this is becoming global bullies. We should not become global bullies. I think that's the danger that a lot of people are afraid of. Like, a lot of people interpreted the Bush administration as being a global bully. That should not be our goal. But we need to realize if we step down from power, the people who are most eager to step up to power are those who would be global bullies, and we would then be the receiving end of that. So yes, we should stand with our allies. Now, there's one more thing we need to talk about, and this is the main point of the video that I want to make. What does Israel supposedly losing Charlie as a supporter mean for the public? Matt makes some really good arguments about, well, Israel is just losing the public, and he talks about the implications of that, and he makes some really good points that we need to wrestle through.
Because listen, the pro-Israel side, as Charlie called it, has lost the majority of the American public. It doesn't have the left at all, which, who cares? That's fine. But it also doesn't have a huge chunk of the right. And it wasn't always that way. Doesn't have the younger generation, like at all. Doesn't have support globally. It's just failed to persuade the vast majority of people. That's the fact. That's the reality. And at some point, if you're on the pro-Israel side, you really need to be honest with yourself and engage in some actual honest self-reflection and self-analysis. You really do. Because you're losing the argument. I mean, you're just losing it. You are. And I've never seen any side of any argument lose this much support this quickly. I can't think of any other example of something like this. And if you're on that side, you need to have the courage and humility to ask yourself what you're doing wrong. And most of the time in life, when you're going around and your message is just not resonating with anyone almost, you got to look at yourself. That's the case most of the time.
All right, this is, as said, the main thing I wanted to talk about in this video. In many senses, Matt is absolutely right. The pro-Israel side has been getting absolutely destroyed. In Charlie's words, you're getting crushed. Of course, not militarily. Israel was crushing Hamas militarily, but politically, the global opinion of Israel is just so bad on the liberal side, but then also now more and more on the Republican side. They're just losing such support. Nations around the world are condemning Israel so badly. In a way, everyone on the pro-Israel side has just kind of had the mindset of, oh, we'll just pass. We'll just let it work itself out. And no, our enemy is moving against us, and we can't just be idle. This is a familiar thing. This is what Christians did in the 70s through 2000s. This is what Republicans did in the 90s through 2000s. It's why liberalism and atheism just swept across the West so broadly. Because we didn't address the problems. We just expected them to work themselves out. But there's a reason why atheism was absolutely crushing it in the early 2000s. And that's because Christians were ill-equipped for defending Christianity. We had too many pastors, preachers, and priests who just knew how to do theology. They didn't know how to actually face hard questions. We, the church, ran from hard questions. So all it really took for new atheism was to just throw out new theories. Jesus mythicism absolutely took the world by storm. And because the Christian populace was so ill-prepared for the lies of new atheism, because they were so unstudied in the truth of Christianity, so many of our members fell away from it. You see, gaining a massive movement is not about having truth. It's just about being persuasive. It's about preying on people who are ignorant. It's about preying on people who are uneducated. It's about preying on people who have not been trained to think their beliefs through. And the skepticisms and the just asking questions are so convincing because we've not been trained to critically think. These deceivers know what they're doing. They're very skilled at it. It's why we must train ourselves to be ready for a defense, because otherwise we will be taken by every wind of doctrine. If we do not know how to investigate an argument, we will fall gullible to every wild conspiracy theory. We will be duped by every agenda. Just because a new ideology takes the world by storm does not make it true. Quite often, lies catch on better than truth. Israel's falling for the exact same mistake, and it is crushing them. Seeing so many of my friends, particularly my younger friends, turning their backs on Israel, seeing so many conservative commentators turning their back on Israel, seeing so many nations get so hostile towards Israel, it really does feel isolating. It makes you feel like you're alone in the world. But so Matt's argument, it has resonated with me. I have been wrestling through this. Seeing so many people turn on Israel, kind of wondering what's going on, what happened. Like just a few months ago, so many of my specifically conservative Christian friends were so pro-Israel. What's going on? So Matt is right that this is something we need to wrestle with. But here's a conclusion I've come to. Matt Walsh is wrong. The truth is not a consensus. The truth is true, whether everyone in the world believes it or no one in the world believes it. The truth is true. He says he can't think of a single instance where a side of any kind has lost this support this fast or this hard. Well, I can think of many. Let's start with what I think is the most notable and clearest case of a faction just suddenly losing a whole bunch of support. There's once this specific person who Stop it. There was once a specific person who entered into a city, and as he entered into the city, he was greeted with the most lavish greeting imaginable, like a royal procession type. Like, the people were so excited to see him coming down the street, they were literally cutting down palm branches, waving them in front of him, laying them on the road before him, even just taking off their coats and laying it on the road before him. Shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Literally a royal procession for this person coming in. They were that behind him. 5 days later, they had him arrested and were crying, "Crucify him! We're going to riot if you don't crucify him! Crucify him!" I'll give you some other examples. Elijah, just 2 days after defeating the prophets of Baal in the showdown of Mount Carmel, just 2 days later, he was hiding in a cave wishing that he would die. Or Moses. After leading the children of Israel out of Egypt, they immediately turned on him. Even after the miracle of splitting the Red Sea and leading the people out of Egypt, they still kept turning on him. His own brother and sister manufactured a new god and said, "Oh no, this was the actual God who saved us, not Moses' God." And then when that got resolved, they finally came up to the promised land, and Moses sent 12 spies into the land, and 10 of them came back. "No, we can't do this. We've got to overthrow Moses and go back to Egypt." And they conspired to kill Moses, Joshua, and Caleb. The greatest movements in all history had sudden losses of support. Immediately after the Council of Nicaea condemned Arminianism as heresy, it seems like St. Athanasius was the last defender of Nicene Christianity, of Nicene Orthodoxy, constantly getting arrested, having his life threatened, facing the Arian heresy head on. The Arian heresy, which just got condemned at the Council of Nicaea. Matt said if your argument is not resonating with people, you might want to ask why. Well, let's see if this argument resonates with people or not. If the world is against the truth, then I am against the world. And that's my big takeaway from all of this. I don't care if the world hates the Jews. Hamas started this war with an unprovoked massacre on the Jewish state while they were celebrating a peace concert, literally advocating for peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians at the Nova Convention. Hamas slaughtered 1,200 peaceful Israeli citizens, took 250 more captive, raped women, burned babies alive in their cribs, shot elderly people in their homes, burned homes down, recorded it all on the cameras of their victims and live streamed it all to their friends, and boasted about it to the entire world. They returned home to parades of celebration. 6,000 Gazans infiltrated Israel that day. Less than 4,000 of them were Hamas. This is the most black and white battle ever fought in human history. There is no siding with Hamas in this. The Palestinians do not have a legitimate argument here. They displayed brutality and savagery in this, whereas Israel has displayed chivalry and restraint in waging their defensive war to get their citizens back. Israel has launched the most civil and humane war in the entire history of warfare. One side wants peace, the other side wants genocide. And the side that wants peace is capable of genocide, but is refusing. And they are being accused of genocide anyway. So I don't care if I was the last non-Jew alive defending Israel. I care about the truth. And Israel has been in the right in this war. So I don't care if I stand alone in this. If the world is against the truth, then I am against the world. And this will be nothing new to me. I'm a millennial. I stood mostly alone for Christianity as a teenager in the early 2000s, while most of my friends converted to atheism. New atheism was absolutely crushing it in the early 2000s, and the Christian community was getting cooked. I stood not quite alone in the late 2000s against pro-choice and for pro-life. Pro-choice was absolutely killing it back then. I stood mostly alone in the 20-teens against homosexuality and transgenderism. All of these times, I was against the world then, and I don't mind being against the world again. It is for this reason Christ called us to be holy, which means to be set apart, not like the rest of the world. Paul told us to not be conformed to the world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So I don't care if the entire world turns its back on truth. I care about truth. I will be against the world. The world has often turned its back on Israel and the Jewish people. It's been catastrophic every time. The world has often turned its back on marriage and sexuality. It's been catastrophic every time. The world has often turned its back on Christianity, and it's been catastrophic every time. I stand on God's truth, not the ever-changing whims of men's opinions, toss and turn like waves of the ocean. And as it has been said before, their boos mean nothing to me. I've seen what makes them cheer. I can think of a million examples of when the truth stood against the world of lies and propaganda. And so, if I have to stand alone, so be it. And if my stance is in vain, because the world overpowers me, then, well, here I stand. I can do no other. Thanks for watching, guys, and God bless.